Good afternoon. I'm Alison Oswald. I'm one of the managers in standards development, and I'm the project manager for the modernization of standards, processes, and procedures implementation. Today, I'm going to talk about the MSPP project. We're going to start with some history on the initiative before transitioning into the current activities in the implementation phase. Next slide, please. At its February 2025 meeting, the NERC Board of Trustees passed a resolution forming an industry-led modernization of standards, processes, and procedures task force to conduct a strategic review of NERC's reliability standards development process. The task force met throughout 2025 to develop a set of recommendations to modernize the process, and early on, the task force members identified 3 key guiding principles as core to this initiative. First, the need to transform and modernize the standards process. Second, to identify areas of opportunity to save time and remove redundant steps. The task force is specifically concerned with creating efficiencies and reducing timelines associated with the standards process. And third, to provide clear opportunities for stakeholder input, due process, openness, and balance of interest consistent with Section 215 of the Federal Power Act. These principles remain central to our efforts in the current implementation phase. As I mentioned, the task force met throughout 2025 to develop the recommendations. Over the course of that year, they brainstormed and refined concepts, turned these concepts into draft recommendations, and ultimately polished them into the final recommendations paper that was released in early 2026 and approved by the NERC Board in February of 2026. The task force solicited extensive feedback from stakeholders throughout this process, such as industry surveys, common opportunities, in-person workshops, webinars, ad hoc meetings, and more. This feedback was a driving force behind what was included in the final recommendations. Next slide, please. Here's just a bit of insight into what stakeholder engagement looked like over the course of the task force year-long effort. There were over 50 presentations, over 5,800 people attended presentations that were given by the task force. There were 5 interactive sessions held with stakeholders. Over 10 trade and forum groups were engaged by task force members, and 11 regional entity hosted events occurred. Next slide, please. So this slide provides a high-level overview of the new process that's detailed in the task force final recommendations. First, in the standard initiation phase, there will be a semi-annual review and prioritization process. The RSTC will vet all requests for development projects, and the new risk subcommittee will determine the path forward for each standard initiation request and oversee the development of a term sheet, which will aid in the development of the project. Second, the standards drafting phase will consist of a stakeholder subject matter expert pool that will serve as a bench of experts to help develop standards. The risk subcommittee will oversee the drafting process, including assigning SME pool members to certain projects. There is an emphasis on stakeholder consensus earlier in the process by using straw polls rather than ballots. Finally, the balloting phase includes individual entity balloting and a confirmation ballot to confirm consensus with the draft standard, improved registered ballot body voting rules to seek input at the start of the development process, and a refined registered ballot body structure. Next slide, please. In February of 2026, the task force brought to the board the following recommendations: to accept recommendations for transforming the reliability standards framework, direct NERC management in consultation with the MSPP Task Force, to develop proposed changes to the NERC Rules of Procedure documents and submit them for public comment. Direct NERC management in consultation with the MSPP Task Force and respective standing committee members to develop appropriate proposals regarding standing committee charters. And direct NERC management to report on the implementation status at regularly scheduled board meetings until it is complete. Following this decision in February of 2026, NERC staff launched the implementation phase of this initiative to take these recommendations and turn them into reality. Next slide. So now we'll transition to the implementation phase, which, as stated previously, started after the board adopted the recommendations in February of 2026. Next slide. The MSPP implementation is going to be focused on these three work streams that are identified on this slide. These are governance, which cover the ROP and charter revisions that will be needed. Tools, which covers all IT projects needed for MSPP implementation. I'm going to take a moment to expand upon some of those projects. First, the comment and ballot system. This includes changes to the RBB that are described in the report and will integrate with NERC's registration process for onboarding new members. It will also support straw polls and structured comment periods in formal ballots. And this system will have the automated enforcement of voting eligibility that was laid out in the report. We are also looking for this system to be more easily accessible on mobile devices. Next, the Enterprise Document Library. The project will create a company-wide library that's accessible to the public and house archive standards and supporting documents. NERC is looking to enhance AI tools as well. Currently, there is an AI tool to analyze and summarize stakeholder comments on standards postings that is looking to be enhanced. In addition, as supported by the MSPP report, NERC will be testing different AI tools to draft what is being referred to as the version 0 of a standard, making sure that it is technically accurate, draws on relevant technical materials, and complies with NERC's format templates. You will also see website enhancements, and updates and new pages will be created to reflect the updated committee structure and to support form integration. Those forms would be the standard initiation request and the term sheet. These are two forms that we will be integrating into the NERC website with corresponding backend workflows and reporting capabilities. This project will also integrate with a project management system. And finally, the third workflow is pilot programs. This covers targeted areas of the MSPP recommendations that we will pilot to receive feedback and inform final processes when MSPP is fully implemented. Next slide, please. So this slide is displaying our MSPP implementation timeline through 2027. Governance is going to be a large area of focus in 2026 to revise the rules of procedure and the standing committee charters, with the goal to bring the revised ROP documents to the board in February of 2027. An implementation plan will be included that will cover all necessary details on the transition. This will include how we will be transitioning projects under the current SPM, the conclusion date of the standards committee, and when the stakeholder SME pool will start to be utilized for drafting. In Q2 of 2027, we anticipate starting the standard initiation request and term sheet solicitation in preparation for the first standards workshop to be held in Q3 of 2027. MSPP pilots, which I will speak more about later in this presentation, currently include the short-term advisory group, which is supporting the computational loads projects. This group is piloting elements of. Additionally, the standard initiation requests and term sheets are currently being drafted. Staff does anticipate having more projects involved in pilots as the year goes on. And as those projects are identified, it will be widely communicated with industry, as well as updated on this implementation graphic. Like I mentioned before, all the IT projects are currently being worked on. And as progress is made in each one of these tools, additional information will be provided to industry. There will be opportunities for external stakeholders to help test tools with the NERC staff to verify the proper functionality. Next slide, please. So I want to highlight some of the next steps that you're going to see in the governance work stream and the time that we will be asking for stakeholder engagement. The first drafts of the rules of procedure for the new standards processes have been redlined. NERC staff has received feedback on these revisions from the MSPP Task Force. NERC staff has also made revisions to these draft documents based on this feedback to ensure alignment with the recommendations. A public informal posting is scheduled for mid-May. We are targeting May 18th. And a webinar will be scheduled around the time of that posting. A workshop will also be held in late June to receive additional feedback on the draft rules of procedure. Under the current standards processes manual, the standards committee will be asked to authorize posting the revised SPM. We anticipate bringing that action to the standards committee in July. Following that, a formal comment period lasting 60 days will be posted in late summer. The RSTC and risk and SC charters are being reviewed for process revisions with the plan to include them as background material to the formal posting. At the June joint committee meetings, we will be presenting more information on the transition plans for all of the committees that are involved. That is scheduled for mid-June. Final rules of procedure changes are being targeted to be presented to the board in February of 2027 and filed with FERC shortly after. All standing committee charter and process revisions will be completed no later than the end of 2027. Next slide, please. Multiple pilots of the MSPP Task Force recommendations are being considered. But today I'd like to cover at a high level what will and won't be considered and included in any of the pilots of the MSPP recommendations. We will be looking to create the new standard initiation request and term sheet templates in Q2 of 2026. Once these are finalized, staff will be looking to test these documents with some of our current projects and receive industry feedback on the content of both documents. Increased stakeholder engagement is at the core of the MSPP recommendations. The standards team is committed to continuing to engage with industry on drafts of standards, receive feedback and consensus prior to posting the standards for ballot. Industry workshops will continue. Additional webinars on drafts will occur, as well as circulating drafts for feedback to trade organizations and other groups during the drafting phase. NERC is using the ad hoc concept in the SPM section 4.3 to create a short-term advisory group, which will solely support the computational load effort and will disband afterwards. This advisory group is going to provide strategic guidance to that project and expedite and enhance the consensus building. The advisory group is open to interested volunteers through April 30th, and we encourage anybody with relevant expertise to join. This group is not a carbon copy of what's proposed in the MSPP recommendations. It will only support the computational load project, and it will not continue in perpetuity. Given the structural similarities, this advisory group is serving to pilot certain characteristics of the stakeholder SME pool. We will not be piloting any of the MSPP recommendations that would be in violation of the current standard processes menu. This means the current registered ballot body will remain with the same segments until the ROP changes are implemented. Additionally, the recommendations on voter eligibility being contingent on commenting in an early informal comment period and straw poll, as outlined in the MSPP report, will not be piloted. The current process of joining a ballot body to be eligible to vote or comment in any open comment period or ballot period of a project will remain in place. Additionally, the normal posting times as detailed in the SPM will remain in effect unless a project asks the Standards Committee for a waiver of those times. Next slide. The implementation team will continue to stay engaged with stakeholders throughout this process. The MSPP Task Force website was converted to an implementation webpage. There you'll be able to find updates, newsletters, and other relevant documentation. The MSPP update newsletter is now being published on a quarterly, forward-looking basis. Please note that this is a shift from the monthly cadence during the previous phase. The Q2 newsletter was published earlier this month and can be found on the initiative's webpage. I will continue to provide regular updates at standing committee meetings, the board, the MRC, and additional industry groups as time goes on. As stated previously, there will be an industry workshop held in June to receive stakeholder feedback on the draft rules of procedure revisions. There will be additional informal opportunities to provide feedback, such as during presentations by NERC and MSPP Task Force members, on webinars, during ad hoc meetings, or at conference sessions. The MSPP email is still available for individuals to send in questions and comments. It is mspp@nerc.net. Please feel free to send anything that way. Next slide. And that concludes our presentation. We can take any questions.
Okay, I do have one question that came in for you real quick. The question is, how does this new process affect standard drafting teams that have already been working and continue to work on new standards?
We will include a transition plan when we file the rules of procedure with the board, but we are working to wrap up as many projects as we can currently in operation before the MSPP new paradigm comes into play. But there might be some projects that will continue under the current SPM rules while they wrap up, even though the new MSPP paradigm has started. But that will all be laid out in the transition.
I have another question. Will the June workshop be in person?
Right now, the June workshop is scheduled to be virtual.
All right, they're flooding in, so bear with me. So how will this affect ongoing standards that are struggling to achieve passage, like SIP 14 specifically?
We will be doing our best to wrap up all the open projects we can. There might be some projects that are considered in the transition plan as being shuttled through the RSTCs and risks process that is laid out in MSPP to see if they should continue as projects or another avenue would be a better way for the risk to be addressed.
Thanks. And then what are some of the improvements that NERC wants to address with this new process? Can you share any?
Definitely want to get a lot of stakeholder engagement and feedback early in the process. That is very key to the success of projects, and the MSPP recommendations have honed in on that and set that up to receive industry support on the SIRS, on the term sheets, and having the stakeholder SME pool be really engaged in starting the drafts of the standards at the beginning from a place of consensus.